Next question. Hey, David, the Red Sox in your city of Boston just renamed Yawkey Way to Jersey Street to distance themselves from Tom Yawkey, who is a noted racist. What do you think about this and other renamings of Confederate leaders and other things? There's also the Yawkey Boston College building and the Yawkey Mass Ave Hospital in Boston. Yeah, so Yawkey Way, very, very famous place outside of Fenway Park, which was at one point not a pedestrian street. Now it's basically been turned into like a post-security. It's almost like a part of Fenway Park at this point. Like you can only get into certain parts of it with a
Well,
ticket.
on game days.
On game days, of course. It was renamed because Tom Yawkey has a long history of racism, and it was decided here in Massachusetts that it's not good and we got to go. We got to get out of that. However, a lot of other stuff still has his name, although from what I've read, some of those things like the Yawkey Hospital is named after his wife. You know, you make the call. I don't know whether she was also racist, but it's the same name. I don't really know. So the question is, what do I think about the renamings? I am generally in favor of doing renaming when we seem to be glorifying movements or ideas that are discriminatory in natures, right? So when you have a school named after someone fighting against the North during the Civil War to preserve slavery, that's not where kids should be educated, right? So that one is very, very clearly on one side of the line. A football team being called the Washington Redskins, I think it's out of touch with modern society. I think it should be changed at this point. Yawkey Way, guy was a racist. I'm fine with it being changed. He was certainly a less notable racist than some of these others, although within Boston he was more well known. I'm okay with it, but I don't know that I'm out there picketing for that.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
I'm a diehard Red Sox fan. I didn't even know about all this stuff until about a year ago.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Red Sox were the last team to racially integrate, and they would, try black baseball players out at Fenway. And apparently, Tom Yawkey yelled a racial slur at some of them,
Sure,
including Jackie Robinson. So I think you have to I think you have to change the name.
right. So I think now let's talk specifically about Boston and Yawkey Way. Boston, as a so-called very liberal Northeast city, has a big history of racism, a big history of segregation. The city is still significantly segregated by income and in many cases as well by race. There's an incredible amount of documentation of when the Celtics, who had a number of black players pretty early on, the basketball team, the Boston Celtics, horrible racism being hurled at them at the former Boston Garden. So I think that in Boston, we have an extra responsibility to go out of our way to make sure that we are not in any way leaving these relics of a retrograde past in Boston in place. So I'm for the renaming of Yawkey Way specifically, but I do think that there is a line at which we have to say, wait a second, hold on, are we going too far, right? So something named after someone who never did anything racist,
Yeah.
but it was known that in private he called a bunch of Hispanic people something horrible, right? Like, where do we draw the line? We got to be reasonable people at some point. I don't know where the line is, and I think it's always a gray area.
There's a tough, slippery slope that you could go down because, say, Thomas Jefferson, he was against slavery in principle but owned slaves.
Should there be anything named after him?
Right, yeah, because he's known for so many other things. And George Washington, he famously freed his slaves after he died, which I guess he's revered for, but I always thought of that as well. You freed the slaves once you no longer had a use for them.
Yeah.
So should we take out all relics and all mementos of George Washington? I would argue no, but coming up with a principle for that I think is really tough.
And that this is why the people who are all about principles and say once you have the principles, you figured life out. I just disagree, right? Like unless your principle is we don't ever rename anything, and then we could have things named after Adolf Hitler or whatever. And it would be absolutely horrifying. And I don't know the answer, but I know that I'm in favor of institutions that have the opportunity to do renaming, to really examine it and consider what is the goal and what are the merits, and to make the decision that's best for them.